بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على مبعوث رحمة للعالمين سيدنا وحبيبنا وقرة أعيننا قائد الغر المحجلين وشفيع المذنبين وسيدي ولد آدم ولا فخر محمد عبد الله الهاشمي القرشي وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن والاه ثم أما بعد. So alhamdulillah, after a journey of a few years, I think we are completing the Hikam of Sayyidi Ahmed ibn Ata'illah Secondary radiyallahu anhu, that total 264 or so. So we began with the first one some years ago when Ahmed ibn Ata'illah Secondary says من علامات الاعتماد على العمل نقصان الرجاء عند وجود الزلل. From amongst the signs of dependence upon one's deeds is the loss or diminishment of hope upon a misstep. And so with that hikmah, with that aphorism or that wisdom, he introduced to us this way or this path that we can call the path of the Adiphene or the path of as-salikin, those who are journeying and making their way towards a greater and more profound understanding and practice of Islam. And perhaps a useful way to think about it is we can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala transactionally and procedurally. And our Islam becomes just kind of a set of acts of worship. So I prayed this much, I paid this much zakah, I fasted these many days, I've seen this many Ramadans, I've made Hajj and Umrah this times, and often we hear Muslims kind of speak in this particular sense. And there's nothing intrinsically wrong with that. But for some, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to create within their hearts this yearning for something deeper and something more. And many of the ulama have referred to this as al-yaqadha, as an awakening. And this awakening could be indicated by a sort of trepidation or fear that one is not living up to what they think they can live up to. And it could also be indicated by a shawq, right, or longing based upon love for something more than just us being kind of the set sum of our ritual acts of worship. So this is the science of tazkiyat an-nafs, this is the discipline of purifying the soul, and this is sometimes also referred to by its formal name, at-tasawwuf. So Sufism or tasawwuf is not any sort of ritual set of acts that's any different from Islam. It's not mentioning particular names in passing, it's not wearing a particular dress, it's none of those things, but rather it is one endeavoring to live the essence of the teachings of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so in the early period, in the time of the Sahaba, the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it was not referred to as tasawwuf, but the meanings were, you can make an argument, were always indicated in everything that the Prophet ﷺ actually said or anything that he did. Because he did everything with ihsan, he did everything with moral excellence and with a look towards pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and of rectifying the inner in order to rectify the outer. Right? And he said, إِنَّ فِي الْجَسَدِ مُضْغَةً إِذَا صَلَحَتْ صَلَحَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ إِذَا فَسَدَتْ فَسَدَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ أَلَا وَهِيَ الْقَلْبُ. In the heart there is a morsel of flesh. If it is rectified, the whole body is rectified. And if it's corrupted, the whole body is corrupted. This is the heart. So even though he indicated as a physical thing, it's the spiritual heart. In other words, the essence of who we actually are. And so it's fitting that the last three hikam, the last three aphorisms we're going to look at, which complete the hikam, deal with the main activity of the heart that goes towards rectification of the inner being, as it were. And this is something called al-fikr, contemplation. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exhorts us to contemplate in various instances in the Quran. إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ الَّذِينَ يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Verily, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, there are signs for ulil albab, right? The people who, I would say, have this awakening or this yearning created within their heart. Who are they? الَّذِينَ يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ. Those who remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala standing up and sitting down and laying down. And the Mufassirun said, well, that's all three, or it encompasses all the different physical positions one can have. And so the dhikr of Allah, which is often seen by some as the precursor towards the fikr fi masnu'atillah or fi mushahadatillah. So dhikr, remembrance of Allah, which is a prerequisite to observing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and contemplating about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, according to some. And according to some, it's higher than fikr. So one begins by contemplating, and then one recalls the fruits of that contemplation. And all of this informs the inner sense, the inner being of the Muslim. So Ibn Ata finishes with that. And really, I like to think of the Hikam as not kind of a beginning and an end, but it's kind of a cyclical thing. So we can still go back to the first one, and we can read it now again, and we'll get things out of it maybe we didn't get out the first time. Because what we're really seeing here is the Quran and the Sunnah. Don't think anything else. We are seeing the meanings of the Quran and the Sunnah, the meanings that the Prophet ﷺ taught 1500 years ago, and then those meanings transmitted and distilled via the embodiers of the Quran and Sunnah, via the awliya and the ulama and the abdal, wal-ubbad, wal-zuhad, wal-salihin, all different names and categories, Muslimin, mu'minun, but they all can pointing back to the same, the very basic and profound and inherent thing, that we are looking at the Quran and the Sunnah. And so someone who has received such recognition from the ummah, right, received such recognition from the whole community. And the beautiful thing about us, when we say community, we say ummah, we don't mean just people living today or people who lived in the early period. We're talking about all of those people. All of this is ummah. Anyone who lived after Muhammad ﷺ and lived to see his risala is from his ummah. يَوْمَ يُنَادُ كُلُّ أُنَاسٍ بِإِمَامِهِمْ. The day that all the communities will be called by their imam, in other words, their prophet, their messenger, which for us is Muhammad ﷺ, and which is for everybody here, whether they choose to accept that or not accept that. So the community has given broad acceptance to the book of the Hikam. And the testification for that, the witnessing of that, is the amount of attention it's received, the number of commentaries that have been written about it. Some of them even went as far as to say, كَادَ أَن يَكُونَ وَحْيًا. It's almost like revelation. And in fact, we could say it's a distillation of revelation. It reflects revelation. Not just from the words, right? And we've said this before, I'm going to reiterate it. I don't believe the process by which Ibn Ata'illah wrote these Hikam was a research project. Meaning, he didn't go into his library, or whatever library he had access to at the time, and looked at all of the different commentaries and of the Quran and tafsir and hadith and all the different books that are written before, and then he started to do research, and he said, let me kind of research this and come up with some things that summarize all of this. I don't think that was his process. I think his process was an experiential one. He practiced this, he lived it. He learned it from his teachers, who in turn learned it from their teachers. His teacher was Abu al-Abbas al-Mursi, whose teacher was Abu Hassan al-Shadili, whose teacher was Ibn Mashish, and so on. So all of that silsila, right, that chain of transmission, was a faithful chain of transmission, that each one of those people was not a carbon copy of the one before them either. Each one of them took something, and then their own set of experiences and their own set of spiritual experiences formed who they are. And so it comes out in the way of the Hikam. So he was talking from what we would call al-wajd. It's something he found experientially, spiritually, and then he documented what he found as he went along this particular journey on his own. And then he wrote it for others to benefit from. And so we think that also it's divinely inspired. If people like Ibn Ata al-Sakandari weren't divinely inspired, then who was? So, no, we don't put it in the same category as Quran and Sunnah. It doesn't have that weight, but in as much as it reflects the meanings of the Quran and Sunnah, we give it that weight. So, the argument that some may use, well, why are you reading that? You should just read the Quran, you just read the Sunnah. It's a false argument, because we are reading the Quran, we are reading the Sunnah. What do you think this is? It's no different. So, we begin with the Hikmah, the last three of them, number 262. شهود وعيان. فالأولى لأرباب الاعتبار والثانية لأرباب الشهود والاستبصار. Contemplation is of two types. Contemplation of belief and faith, and second, contemplation of witnessing and seeing. The first is for those who are apt to learn lessons from what they see, i'tibar, that we talked about earlier, and the second is for those that experience the vision of God and have insight, الشهود والاستبصار. So the fikratan, right, and they're both good. One is for السالكين, one is for the Adiphene. السالك فكرة تصديق وإيمان، وهو الذي يستدل بالمكونات على المكون أو الكائنات على المكون. So the first one is the one who sees things around them, sees الكائنات, sees existent things, and then says, oh, that couldn't have come by itself. That must have been from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is فكرة تصديق وإيمان. تصديق means I believe God exists. Iman, basic Iman. Allah is here. And that is essential. You can't get to the other things without having that as solid, as your foundation, as the basic underpinning about everything that you are. Tasdeeq wa iman. As reflected in the verse in Surah Al-Baqarah, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. Right? The ones who affirm the existence of al-ghayb, that which they cannot perceive by their senses. So al-ghayb ma ghaba an hawasik. That which you cannot perceive with your senses is the ghayb. So I believe there's angels all around us right now, I have no doubt about it. And at least 10 with every person sitting here. I may not see them, I may not be able to perceive them, but I know they're there. I believe they're there. هذا الإيمان بالغيب, believing in that which you cannot see. And then there's another type of fiqh he mentions here, contemplation of witnessing and seeing. Shuhud wa ayan. This is reflected in the verse, قُلْ انظُرُوا مَاذَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. قُلْ انظُرُوا مَاذَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Look, have nazar, contemplate that which is within the heavens and the earth. Didn't say قُلْ انظُرُوا السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Didn't say look at the heavens and the earth, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not ask us to reflect on something other than Him. He's asking us to reflect upon Him, but via His masnu'at, via the things that are there that are a direct reflection of Him, the heavens and the earth. ماذا في within السماوات والأرض. هذا فكرة استبصار وعيان أو شهود وعيان. This is witnessing, to see that which is within it. So they say this is the type of fikr في ميادين الأنوار, in the realms of light. And this is for the awliya, and this is for the arifin. هم يستدلون بالمكون على الكائنات. They're the ones who see the mukawwin, see Allah, and then everything else is a reflection of that mukawwin, of the one who created and formed, not the other way around. Because they said, how can we نستدل بالفاني على الباقي? How can we take as evidence that which is temporal, that which didn't have an existence, and will sometime in the future not have an existence either, and that's going to indicate to us the one who's everlasting and the one who's always there and always will be and always ever was? It should be the other way around. فَنَسْتَدِلُّ بِالْبَاقِي عَلَى الْفَانِي. So we see the baqi, the one who's everlasting, who's always been there, and his existence then is the foundation of the existence of everything else, of all the other kainat, of all the other beings. So الثانية لأرباب الشهود والاستبصار. So this one, the first فكرة لأولي الألباب والاعتبار. So it's for people of اعتبار, right? People who consider, people who reflect. High maqam. But the second one, لأرباب الشهود والاستبصار. Shuhud means you're actually witnessing it, you're tasting it. And that is the epitome of ma'rifah, and that is the goal of suluk, That is the goal of spiritual wayfaring and journeying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that which you heard about and that which you read, now you taste and now you see it. And now you see it and taste it to the degree that it never leaves you. It's not like there's some moments you have epiphanies and some moments you don't. No, it's more like every moment you see as an epiphany. Every moment you see as a blessing. Every breath you see as an opportunity. Every breath you don't want to waste it. You want to put it to use. You want to put it towards contemplating. You want to put it towards dhikr, remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And ultimately, how we started these sessions, and we said this is the science of the inner journey, that really is the inner journey, where the journey then becomes the destination. Remain on that journey. Have the inner life. Reflect, remember, contemplate, and then do. Do what you're inspired to do. Do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspires you to do. And this is how Muslims built great civilizations and built great libraries and ultimately built great people. It was by people embodying these meanings. It wasn't by the acquisition or the raiding of wealth, as some historians might want us to believe. It had nothing to do with that. Those were side issues. But they were able to build great communities of people and great civilizations of people because they were able to build the great person. They were able to connect a person with the true humanity that they always had within them, but in a manner that they made available for everybody. And that was the prophetic mission. And still is the prophetic mission. وَالْعُلَمَاء وَرَثَةُ الْأَنْبِيَاء. And the scholars and the awliya, they are the heirs of the prophets, and most of all our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Alayhi afdal salatu wassalam. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. So we'll stop here. Jazakumullah khair, barakallahu fikum. Thank you all for attending, not just today, but in the past. And I feel humbled. It's a great honor that we got a chance to read this book from cover to cover, or the aphorisms, and had a chance to talk about it and think about it. Now the next steps for us is to try to live it as best as we can. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq, give us najah and success in being able to do that. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.